How you guys feeling? Yeah? Okay.
They're still here.
Yeah. Well, I guess I just want to start off by first reintroducing you guys, starting with Mr. Director here, Evan Marlowe. That was
Evan Marlowe, writer-director.
Yeah, and then Kerry.
Kerry Marlowe, producer and voice actor.
Fantastic.
I'm Danny Montooth. I puppeteered everybody.
Alrighty. Well, I guess I just want to start out. Why puppets? That's a very interesting vessel to tell a story through.
Yeah, I think, we started the process about 10 years ago, so I don't really remember the details of its genesis, but apparently I talked to Kerry recently, and she said I had a dream where everybody was a puppet. So I'm going to take her word for it. I just woke up and thought, hey, everyone in this movie has to be a puppet. It's like marionettes? She said, no, you said it was realistic puppets. So then I wrote the script, and I was like, should I consider that they're puppets and like take it easy and not, no, she just write the script like you would, you know, pretend they're not puppets, and then we'll figure it out later, which is probably the worst advice I've ever gotten. But of course the puppets are motivated by the theme of the movie, otherwise it would have just been a device, so it kind of works into the whole thing. Any other thoughts on that?
We are married, by the way. It's the waking up.
In spite of that.
Yeah. Well, we obviously, Evan said, okay, puppets. And I thought, well, we really need some old school voices for these. And I said, well, Evan, who do you have in mind? Because, you know, as they're puppets, we can probably go out some amazing name talent because they only need to do one day in the vocal booth. And this is great for us because, you know, we can spend 10 years with these puppets and they spend 8 hours in a voice booth. So he said, well, you know, this is the 70s homage to old school horror. I don't know if you saw, there's many, many Easter eggs in there. You might need to see it a few times, but you will notice some homages to different movies throughout in there. So obviously Robert Englund, Freddy Krueger is one of my all-time favorites. And we literally just said to him, we're making a horror movie and it's puppets. And he was like, when do I come? I was like, okay, thank you. And then it went on from there. And the late and great Sid Haig, the same thing. It's just such a weird and wonderful concept. And the fact that they read the script and they were like, this is so weird, so twisted, so sick. I think James Marsters said it's so awful and I hate it so much, but I really want to do it and I love it. So we just got really lucky, I think, because it's something no one's ever done before. And then Evan's brain just created this weird and wonderful world that everybody just went along with it. And the same with Jordan Peele. We got very, very lucky with him because he actually majored in puppeteering in school. So for him, this was like a no-brainer. And he was also coming to his end of acting. He's gone more into the writing, producing, and then it was right before he won the Oscar for Get Out. So we were really lucky to have him right before he won the Oscar. But the same for him. I think puppets are so weird and intrinsic for everybody because we've grown up with having little puppets ourselves and marionettes and those sort of things, that we all have this weird kind of sick curiosity that, you know, are they creepy? Are they funny? Are they fun? And then to make them humanistic, I think, brings on a whole new level.
I think we've exhausted that subject. Oh, I just want to add, James Marsters literally called the script a piece of filth after he read it the first time. And he didn't want to do it at first. But then he thought, oh, puppets, then that could be interesting.
Well, I mean, I guess going off of that, I loved how uncanny these puppets were. In the world, like, I'm an avid Muppet enjoyer, but seeing these in all their glory, I was so grossed out. What was that process like in coming to this iteration of?
I would just say that was kind of the goal, to put it in that canyon where it's not quite human, because what's the point? Because then you just get humans. But just so it's a little unsettling. But that said, I think I don't want to hand it over to Danny then, segue, because I think it's just a chunk of latex without a good puppeteer. So the question is, how does he make it come to life?
Oh boy.
Give us your secret.
Sure. I mean, years of training, honestly. So I was a puppeteer at Disney for a very long time. I did Muppet-style puppetry for a long time. So I applied what I knew from the types of shows that I did, which were a lot more zany, a lot more like Chuck Jones style movements. There's a lot of toning down that I had to do for these characters, because again, they're just people. They're only going to move so much, and physically, some of them could only move so much. So there was a lot of framework that we had to like work within to get the best performances out of each character, because all of them function differently. Les had 3 puppeteerable heads and a mask and a bunch of other things. And some of the insides, like Clive was all fiberglass and screws on the inside, and that was my first day of shooting. I think I walked away with a bloody thumb, like just a stump, because it just sliced me up inside. So there's a lot of, some moved beautifully. Like I think most of the Les heads worked really well, and the mother worked fantastic. And my favorite is Richter, the cop, because he got to do the smoking trick, which is something I've always wanted to do. It was really fun. And I got lucky with all the great performers that they mentioned, because they gave me wonderful like musicality to ride on the way they delivered their lines. So it allowed me to really sit into their performances, take everything they gave me, and try to match it with movement. Yeah, puppets.
Puppets. I'm like, I think in one word, this could just be brought up as puppets, and thank God. But no, I loved just seeing how this was emulative of just so many different iterations of the horror genre. Like I always love a reference to things, but even if it was unintentional, I loved your creepy little humanoid baby puppets. That was so awesome. It reminded me so much of like just classic 80s style horror, like, you know, with The Thing and Alien. Like, what was that process like? And I mean, I guess even just for all of you and bringing that like inspiration to the project as well.
Yeah, I mean, I love 70s, and just in general, as far as cinema, I just think it was, and a lot of the arts in the 70s just really kind of exploded, but especially horror. And I think our main character here is kind of fixated on it, which is why it reveals itself in his fantasies with the voices and everything else. So, so I try to find ways of sticking as much as I can into the movie. And when you had about 7 or 8 years to make a movie, you kind of put stuff in there. So there's a lot of Easter eggs, a lot of references, a lot of motifs that recur. I'm sure you don't want to sit through it again to find them all. Maybe someday somebody will create a website that goes through all the different things. But those are all in there. There's Close Encounters, there's Alien, there's all sorts of references in there because the character is obsessed with it. And the little baby just goes, you know, me and my fabricator couldn't be here tonight, but we would just bounce ideas back and forth. I'd send him some references, and then he would just go away for a while and come back a month later with a puppet, and it was amazing.
Very nice. Well, shall we open this up to the audience now? Anybody got some questions for these fine folks?
See one. I see 2.
We see some.
Oh, yes.
I'm like, shall I go down to you guys? Sure. Yeah. Mike, who was first? Okay, you're more enthusiastic.
I'm just wondering about the Hera's son. Is that a reference to Hercules? Like
Yeah,
Hera's
actually, you're the
son?
first person in all this year and a half to bring up the name Hercules, and it's a secret, so don't tell anyone. It doesn't leave this room, but it's the motivating point of this. In the story of Hercules, he's guilty, and he undergoes these tasks, and that's exactly where this came from. So there's all these references to Hercules in this. So bingo, you did it.
Awesome.
You unlocked Abruptio.
Nice. Are they like the 12 tasks, like corresponding?
More or
to
less.
the
You'll
one?
see references. You'll see, like, you know, symbols of Hercules embedded throughout, you know, on different things in there. But Hera was Hercules' mom, and hence Harrison.
Yeah. Awesome. Oh.
I have 2. The first is, was there a particular scene that was really challenging on a technical level? And were there any scenes that you weren't able to do on a technical level, things you wanted to do that you couldn't execute?
Every scene had had something impossible that has never been done before. And every time we had to just problem solve. And, you know, COVID was awful, but it did give us some breathing space to problem solve a lot of the things in advance. And we didn't have a studio breathing over our necks. So yes, I mean, how do you make a puppet smoke, drive a car, shower, whatever? So, you know, some of it's cheating. Some of it you could do with a puppet, 90% of it. So we just had to figure out ways to do it and move a camera, because you don't want to see talking heads for an hour and a half. So make them look realistic. Was there anything that stands out in your mind as horrifying?
The whole thing. No, I think the script was actually much longer, and there was another character that we really, really wanted to be in there. And we were actually going to use the Tustin hangars, which are not far from here. But just that scene alone, I think it was about 5-6 pages, would have cost us about $30,000-$40,000 just for that. And we were like, no. I was like, nope, that's where we draw the line. And then it doesn't even matter. So sometimes you have to make not just a monetary choice, but also for the story. It didn't actually take the story anywhere. So that's one of the things that sort of I think was a betterment for us. The scene at La La Joyland, it was about 107 degrees there. There were fire ants, there were squatters when we went to shoot. And that was one of the first scenes that we shot like 10 years ago. And that stuck with us. I think that was probably the hardest shoot, I think, for all of us, because it was it was September, but it was crazy hot. Yeah, and that was Danny's introduction to the puppet. And this person, the whole 6 foot of him, can fit in a tiny box. In those car scenes where he's puppeteering, he's literally in the back seat, like this, knees up, just in the back, puppeteering around the back of the seat. We didn't have a cutout car or anything. So hats off to Danny. I don't know how he did it. Did you do contortionism or it?
Puppetry is pain, baby. Yeah, no. A puppeteer's job, 90% of it is getting out of the shot. So that's what we do most of the time in any puppet thing. But yeah, driving the car was super hard. The La La Joyland. The funny thing about that day was like the Clive puppet was melting in the heat, all the glue keeping his teeth in. So if you ever watch it again, watch like every other shot of Clive and see where his teeth are in his mouth, whether or not he has a tongue and if his eyes are looking in the same direction, because all that stuff just kept drooping out of him. And I'm like, get back in there. I think physically other hard stuff. There was a lot. So these puppets aren't like, Muppets. Muppets are very small, right? Like your general hand puppet is not going to be much larger than your actual hand, so they're smaller than you think. These, the opposite. They're much larger than you think. Their torsos were full-size mannequin torsos. Their heads are the size of a normal human head. So there's a lot of lifting, a lot of carrying in order to get them in and out of places. I think one of the hardest shots, and I guess, I don't know, it's been a minute since I watched it, but it's when he's tied up in the chair, because I had to hide behind his body, behind the chair, while still fully puppeteering him. So it was the weirdest twisting I think I've ever done, to just align my body like with the monitor. That was nuts. Anyway, I could go on for days.
And you would give me some pushback, like I can't get, and I'm like,
it wasn't possible.
yeah, but we still got the shot.
We got any other? Hello.
So it has a dreamlike quality, like a phantasm, sort of reminded me throughout. Was that a intentional right from the beginning that it was going to have this disjointed, dreamlike quality? Keeps you a little off balance throughout the film?
Yeah, I mean, when you put it together over years and nothing's ever been done like this before, you really don't know what it's even going to be something that'll stand on its legs and be a narrative that people will engage with puppets emotionally. So you don't even know what you're going to get at the end of the day. But that was kind of the intent, for it to have this weird thing. You're not looking at a real person. This is, spoiler alert, these aren't real people. So strange things are going to happen. And he, like he says in one scene, he kind of feels like he's moving through glue. So I mean, it's kind of like there. It should have a trance-like quality to it, and I think it does. I mean, if you let yourself get into the experience, there's plenty of people that don't want anything to do with the experience. If you do, just kind of sink into it and just kind of be present with the puppets, I think you'll kind of get pulled along into this weird world. All right, thank you very much.
We got any other folks? Anybody? There were a lot of puppets in this.
Thanks for coming, everyone. Thanks
Yeah.
for staying.
Yeah. Any last minute questions? We got you back here.
Hi. So I was just curious about like the puppet design, like what went into that when because you're not working with real people. So how do you like design the puppets to be like, oh, this is, I guess like their character traits and stuff, like the gosh, I already forgot the name, but the one dude that kept telling jokes, like very unsettling to look at. So like I'm curious, like what was the thought process behind designing these characters?
Well, part of it was fortunately we had the voice first, so the puppet fabricator could listen to the track. I sent him that, I sent him references, and he put it all together. So I would send him pictures of things or tell him, give him ideas. And I'd say, like, I don't want to see the teeth on this next puppet, but he gave us the teeth. Because he knows people don't like to see the teeth. And the eyes, he painted them by hand. He didn't get prefabricated eyes because he knew the life is in the eyes. So it was just a matter of, and it was all kind of inventing it from the beginning. We didn't know what to do. First we life casted a person, our friend, and then we realized we didn't really need to life cast people. We just needed someone that could sculpt really well and build it up. And we built the whole torso. It was incredibly heavy. Puppeteer's arm was, I don't know if you did Mother, but sinking down like, oh God, it was so heavy. So we figured you don't even need to do that. We could build a frame of PVC and just put the upper part on it and disguise the rest of it. So we kind of evolved, made it lighter, easier to get the emotions into it without fighting against it. But it was just trial and error over the course of years. Anything to add on a design standpoint?
They were it was interesting because I think they were developed by someone who makes a lot of stuff, makes a lot of beautiful stuff, but doesn't necessarily make a lot of puppets. So there's a lot of kind of exploring, because every puppet physically moved differently, and I think it was him kind of problem solving as he went. So like some of the puppets had softer palettes. Those are the ones that I had a lot of fun puppeteering. So like Les and Les's mother and Richter to a certain degree. The rest of them were kind of tight and a little more spring-jawed, like Clive. I mentioned him before. He's the one who cut me open, but I had to fight a spring in that because they created a ball and socket joint for his neck, which was a great idea, but it was designed to be a rod puppet, and then at the last minute, he changed his mind and made it a hand puppet. So I'm having to like pull down, push up against the torso in order to get it to turn the way I needed it to turn. But I loved it because every single one was its own challenge, and every physical limitation actually gives you something to work with within a character, right? It's like Yoda's ear wiggle, right? That came out of a defect, and that became canon. That is just a thing that happens with Yoda. They CG'd it into the prequels. Like, it's rad. I love stuff like that because it forces you to be creative, as opposed to if I got everything I ever wanted in a puppet, which will never happen. It's never happened. It forces you to think your way out of those boxes and find good performances out of each of those characters. So I loved it. And I think they all looked fantastic. And I loved the eye on, what is his name, the lawyer?
Oh, yeah,
Doomkopf. Yeah, because he had a little thing you could wiggle to like flip his eye back into his skull. So that one wasn't post. That was just something I got to do. So it was a fun toy.
Yeah, I was just like, hey, let's just try that and see what happens.
Well, thank you guys so
Thank
much
you
for
so
coming
much.
out. This
Thank
was
you.
such an interesting watch, but a fun watch
thank
at
you.
that.